our hands together to welcome our panel of MDs today. We're really delighted to have the MDs with us today to support us with Zodiac 2.1. And every round that we run Zodiac, we try to have an MD panel so that it really makes all these learnings real. And we try to get stories, real life stories from the MDs who've been there, done that, seen all these challenges that you're going through from a first-hand perspective as well. So I'd like to start off with inviting our three panelists today to introduce themselves, giving a very short introduction to who they are, what they do, and also perhaps telling us what is their superpower. Maybe we can start with you, Hock Heng.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So, my name is Hock Heng. I look after the two manufacturing sites of GSK. Been with the company for about 26 years, which is a long time. What's the superpower actually don't have, but I think what I believe is if you make yourself approachable, smart, that will probably be one of the good things I used to do. Yeah, that's it for me.
Good afternoon, I'm Arleen Paulino, and as you heard, I'm with Amgen. So probably no different than my colleagues up here, I'm responsible for the activities here in our Singapore operation. And for us, we're fairly new to Singapore, so we just started a few years ago. And I moved here at the beginning of 2016 and really have loved the opportunity to be in this country and to start up our operations here. Superpowers, so I have two. One's not very useful, so maybe I'll start with the one that maybe is more useful. So one of my superpowers is the ability to attend a meeting and have people's questions answered without actually ever answering the question.
Very useful.
It's very useful because that means that the people in the room actually have to figure it out for themselves, and they don't realize they're figuring it out for themselves through the questions that I ask them back. Mm-hmm. And then my really not useful superpower is I can show up at a sale, any sale, no matter where it is in the world, and I will find the one thing that is the most expensive and is not on sale.
That's good.
So that is a terrible superpower. I hope you don't have that one.
Thank you.
Hi, yeah, my name is Prasad. I think I know several folks in the audience, certainly the Pfizer people, but also all the many companies that I work for in Singapore. So I've been working in the industry. I'm very passionate about manufacturing. I've done all except medical devices. And I've been in the industry for 30 years, 28 of which is in Singapore. I've done all functions, including HR, but I haven't done finance yet. Right. And in terms of, superpowers, I think I have, I like this, by the way. It's a fireside chat. I don't see the fire, but it's probably within us, right?
Fireside chat.
Fireside chat. Okay. My superpower, I think, is curiosity. Now, every time I take a plane, I think about it, why is this not dropping off the sky? My default understanding is that things should fail. If they don't fail, we need to understand why they're not failing. And that knowledge and information helps you when things fail. Quite often, we wait until things fail, and then we go and search and find out what happened, what failed. But for me, I'm kind of paranoid. I think things will fail all the time. Mm-hmm. And so I try to understand, read up. The other thing is that I like all kind of information, so you can wake me up in the middle of the night. Any topic, I can talk on it. People call me walking encyclopedia. Thanks.
Thank you. So I'm also very curious, using your superpower, Prasad. I'm a curious person. And one thing I'm curious about is, I've actually personally never seen a leadership program like Zodiac. And when BMAC and EDB first approached us to design this program, we were very curious as to what was the impetus for this program? Because it's very unusual to see all these competitors, so-called competitors, come together and collaborate and invest the time and effort and resources in what is really quite a very big initiative. So for any of you, want to take a stab at answering this? Okay.
Let me just give you some insights of how BMAC operates. So all the MDs we met 4 times a year, and one of the agenda item that we every time we meet about is the human resource. And we also try to track the people's movement. Who move to where, why we have more people moving.
That's why Prasad knows everything.
No?
I move with them.
But the biggest issue that we face is not the moving between the industry, but it's the people moving out of the sector. And that is the biggest threat that we have. So how do we make this BMAC a best place to work together? That's one. And we also want to make all the BMAC companies in Singapore to be the best in their respective network, the most innovative, the most competitive one in the network. And the way to make it, we have to rely on the resources, the talents that we have. And when we analyzed it, we found that actually one of the key differentiator is the soft skill. Yeah, the technical thing we can learn pretty fast, but soft skill somehow in all our respective training program, very biased towards the compliance, the assurance towards training, but this part of the soft skill training is lacking. So that's the reason why that we initiate this design of this course. Another reason that I'm so passionate to continue and support this program is this setting of getting all of you together help you to normalize your thinking about the other side is greener.
It's all gray everywhere.
After all, you know that you have a common challenge, you have a common issues, but it's up to us how to make your place more conducive, more friendly to you. And we learn how to make this place easier for everyone. I think that's one of the motivations that we could design this. How should Arleen have anything to add?
Yeah, maybe in addition to that, so when this program was first started, it was a pilot program and only a few of the BMAC companies were part of the pilot program. And the rest of us heard from the readout of the pilot and the impact that the training had on the staff who went through it. And there's a lot of skills that we can teach people. But there are skills, especially the soft skills, that you need time, you need practice, and you need the opportunity to test those things out. And this type of a setting where you have a lot of people trying to figure out these skills together enables, at least in my mind, it felt like it enabled us to accelerate the ability to grasp those skills. And so, you know, for us, we were thinking about it in the context of there's these additional skills we could provide to people, but if we can get a big enough mass of the population across the companies speaking the same language, thinking about it in the same way, that it could really be a tipping point for the entire community. And so that was, you know, for me, a really big bonus.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, for us, so my predecessor was George Luthier, maybe some of you know him. So he was very passionate about this program, and I too am. I guess within our organizations, we do get, this is not totally new to us. Within our organization, we have very similar programs or bits and pieces of what you're going through. But you know, the attendance is kind of limited because you have to fly into Tokyo to a training center, or you have to go to the New Jersey, New York City, and because of you know, those budgetary reasons, we can only restrict to a small number. And usually it's part of a grander leadership training. So it's pretty exciting that at your stage in career, which I don't think any of us got this exposure at your stage of career that you're getting this opportunity to do this. And we also found, and I spoke to George several times, why, I also know why it's called Zodiac, probably you know that.
Yeah, we want to know that. This is the first question on the first day. Why is it called Zodiac?
Oh yeah, from what I heard, I hope I'm right, that this was around Chinese New Year time. And they were all thinking about which year, they were born or something like that. And they came with the name Zodiac, for want of a better name. So basically George basically told me that we have some of the smartest technical trained people. What about Singapore? We are a small country with a limited pool of workforce. A big nation like China and India, if 1% of the workforce contributes, that runs into hundreds and thousands. And in a country like Singapore, we need to leverage every ounce of talent. And this actually, we believe, will help us to get the most of what we have, other than just bringing a lot more people, which is not possible to just bring. So make do with what we have, and help those folks who are struggling in some of aspects of their career growth. Smart engineers know what to know, very motivated, but they are having bottlenecks in their career. And we think this will smoothen that.
Great. And we've also spent a lot of time talking about VUCA, this world that's volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, and how those VUCA factors are actually impacting all of us. We had some very lively discussions about how our lives are becoming more complex and volatile. But interested to hear also from each of you, how is VUCA impacting you and your life? Anyone can start, by the way.
Okay, I can start. So, can't remember. I shouldn't tell this. You know how old I am, right? So anyway, it was more than 30 years back. I did a course on impact of science and technology in the world of future. It's an optional elective, right? In university, you do optional electives just for fun. The textbook was Future Shock by Alvin Toffler.
Right.
It's a very old. Now, I'm a big fan of science fiction, I read a lot of stuff. And in those days, they told us, the world is going to be crazy. The rate of change is going to be. But nothing happened all my career. Nothing changed, And it's happening now. Too late for me, but it's happening now. I've been waiting for this change for 30 years. I don't think much has changed. Take the standard QC lab. It's like World War I, Nothing has changed. Okay, the instruments got more sophisticated. The way you handle samples, nothing has changed. They come in the same bottles, maybe better looking, but the people are the same. There's very little, there are systems that are not as integrated as they should be. There are people who are still testing the way they used to be. We don't see the level of robotics that we should see in a manual thing. And lab was just an example, but it's the same across the industry. So now it's coming, and you have no choice. If you don't evolve, you will evaporate. So me, I've escaped it.
And this actually, you brought up Alvin Toffler, the futurist. One of his famous quotes is it's really important to unlearn. More important to learn to unlearn and relearn than just the learning itself. Yeah. So is there any mindset that you have had to unlearn, Prasad?
Oh yeah, I speak too much. So yeah, no, I had to go through an executive coach a few years back. It's very, very difficult when you're 50 years old plus to unlearn,
Yeah.
You have a lot of baggage from your career, You can't you are very emotionally attached to your baggage. But the smart person listens to the voice of the customer. Take your 360-degree feedback seriously. Don't question the feedback provider, question yourself. What made them write what they did in your feedback? Oh, he never liked me. That's why he always gives me ones and twos, something. No, that's a very defensive mode. So my unlearning was the adult learning model, where you get to know what you're not good at. Most of us think we are very good until we learn a little bit and we realize we actually don't know that much. It's very difficult to eat humble pie there. And then write it down and seriously define your future state. Where would you like to go, and what are you going to do to go there?
Thank you. Wonderful answer. How about yourself, Arleen?
Yeah, so I actually really thrive in an environment where there's that volatility, and there's change, and there's uncertainty. And I think I've been pretty fortunate because the roles that I've had really played to those strengths. So I spent a good portion of my career in process development, where we were looking at innovative new ways to do things, and by nature, things were uncertain.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, when I look at this and the evolution that's happening, I actually do think there have been small changes along the way, and then some big changes. And I like to think about this industry not just, hey, I'm in manufacturing and I'm, producing this medicine, but taking the biology, taking the engineering, and all of that science and trying to apply it is such an exciting space to be. And so the reason I think I've thrived in this is from a resiliency perspective. I guess I've been very fortunate that I'm quite resilient. And that doesn't mean that, oh, the wind blows and I just blow wherever the wind blows, but it means that I have the ability to, address what's around me, recognize there are things I can control and there are things I can't control. And the things I can control, take hold of those and drive those forward, and the things that I can't, one, recognize you can't control them, and then do your best to figure out, well, how do you adapt in that uncomfortable environment? Because every one of us is gonna be uncomfortable at some point. And I would say if you're not uncomfortable, then you're not challenging yourself. There was one point in my career, I had been doing a specific job for a while, and I loved it, and I was like, oh, I'm really good at this, I like it. And I was asked to change roles. And I thought, oh, but I really like what I'm doing. And so I changed roles, and about 8 months into the new role, as I was reflecting on the performance I had that year, I realized just how comfortable I had become in my old role. What I would advise is think about that comfort that you have and ask yourself from time to time, are you too comfortable in the role that you're in? Are you challenging yourself enough? It doesn't have to be a new role, it could just be a different challenge that you take on, or a different assignment to help you to keep adding to that toolbox of tools that you use in your career.
Absolutely, it's so topical because we just spent the whole morning talking about growth mindset and having growth, having this mindset of stepping out of your comfort zone to take on new challenges, and developing that resilience is something we'll be working on more on at the end of this training as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I just want to add from a different perspective this local law. When we deal with the situations, we always expect that things may change. Today, you respond to these situations, you come up with certain decisions you make based on the information that you have. But because the things are very uncertain, things can change, we need to frequently do a check step to ensure that what you have decided, the path, it is still valid. The dangerous thing is you make a call and then you make adjustment, and over time it just drift into the situations that you forgot about. Your previous key principle is already compromised. So in this kind of environment, I believe that everyone needs to know what is your core organized belief that you should not compromise. You need to flex about adjustment about when to respond, but be mindful about the drift. I think that's because you guys will be involved in many decision making. You will respond to the changes in these actions, but I think just that the principle is probably very important.
Thanks, Hock Heng. So I have also been telling the MDs that we've been enjoying our training so far, because I think out of the 3 batches, this batch is the most vocal and asked the most questions. We are already a lot of questions this morning about topics that may be relevant for the MDs. So at this point of time, I also want to pause and ask what are some of the questions that you may have for the MDs here. There's so much wisdom up in the front of the room. And if you have a question, raise your hand and we'll run over and pass the mic to you. Yeah. Thanks, Gaston. Sean, over here.
I'm Gaston from Roche. For one question for the panel. What do you think some critical skill or leadership strategy to manage a multi-generation workforce? Because the workforce can be young, some are low backgrounds. As a leader, how to manage conflict, how to manage prioritize.
Right. So the question is how you manage multi-generational differences in perspectives, etc.
Okay, I'll take a first stab at that.
Yeah.
Maybe because they think I'm younger than the two.
We're all younger.
So I think it's a fantastic question because if you think about the changes that are happening in our industry, there's different types of skills that are needed that maybe we didn't think about before. And when I think about the multi-generational workforce, I think we need to think about it in the context of what can we each learn from each other? Because sometimes people think that, oh, you know, they're the supervisor, they're the manager, they're gonna have more information and they're gonna have the best answers. But in some cases, because of the different perspectives, we should be looking to people who maybe are newer in their career or who come from a different place. You know, maybe I won't use the age thing, but just in the context of the maturity of their career, there are things that, like every day I learn from my team here in Singapore that maybe I didn't think about because my experience didn't give me that same perspective. So I think the one thing I would say is think about who you can learn from, not always just being the people above you or who are in supervisory roles, but think about your peers and what you can learn from them, and then how do you leverage, you know, kind of bottoms up teaching in that aspect. I think the other thing also is to identify where there are strengths that different populations bring, and then capitalize on those strengths. You know, my leadership team, some of us are terrible with electronics, horrible, right? And some of us are really great with it. And so, you know, the nice thing is to be able to say, how do you complement the strengths and the kind of weaker areas with what else is out there? And then I think it's important to recognize that we come from different places and different mindsets, and the things that incentivize or are interesting to some people are not interesting or incentivizing to others. And so that goes back to trying to have conversations to understand what's important to staff and to your team. Because if you try to maybe do the peanut butter approach, you use that term here, where you just spread everything evenly, you may not get the best results, right? So it's about like honing in on what's important for the individuals.
Thank you. Anything to add?
Yeah. All right, so I think all of us have this diversity and inclusion, you know, programs within the organization. So in reality, we shouldn't even be talking about generational differences. Young get discriminated, but so do older folks get discriminated. So we are not allowed to talk about age or any such differentiation. In my mind, the differentiation is those who have solutions and those who don't have solutions. Those who bring stuff on the table, we don't care, whether they're young, old. I think that's where our focus should be. We should, one pitfall I notice very much in our society, so it's not about a generational thing, is be too quick to draw your educational discipline or functional boundaries. I'm a chemist, that's engineering stuff, I don't know. No, I mean, all these things is less than 200 years old, you know, these disciplines, you know. In the ancient days, we had philosophers who swing between religion and science all the time, who would actually not box themselves into a biologist or a chemist. They understand the fundamental principles of how things operate, physical sciences, biological sciences, and they won't hesitate. So I give you a small example. I don't want to boast about it. Some of you use Flight Radar 24. I think I showed it too. Okay. So this is an app that shows you every plane where it is right now in the air. So if you don't have it, download it into your iPhone. So there are 17,000 planes right now in the air. I can see all of them on my iPhone. So I used to be I'm a pharmacist, by the way. I'm not an engineer. And I used to just go onto this website and collect information on my iPhone. And one day I said, you know what? I want to feed to this website. So I went to Germany, bought a radar. I bought a Raspberry Pi. You all know it's a tiny computer which is the size of a credit card. Runs on a Raspbian language, Unix. I taught myself how to figure out the coding and how to hook up a TV signal dongle on it, buy it from China, from AliExpress, and figure out. And now I have 2 radars running at home. It cost me less than $200, And I said, I did it to just stretch myself. I want to see as a pharmacist, can I do stuff that engineers can do? Why not, And the same for engineers, can they do paintings,
Yeah, wonderful example about how you can actually box yourself in unwittingly and how important it is to keep on challenging your own limiting beliefs and assumptions, which is what we just talked about this morning. Okay, if you don't, do you have anything to add? If not, we can.
No, just want to. We just have a long service recognitions for our staff yesterday. So we have a staff with us working GSK for 40 years.
Wow.
So everyone's called Auntie and the new generations, the people who work with her, is some of them will be just like the age of her daughter or the son. So as a management team, I think it will be good to actually leverage that strengths and for each other, where you learn how to exploit or leverage on the experience of these senior staff, and they tend to give them a lot of the good coach on how to deal with the different situations. And at the same time, her personal experiences, you love to work with all these young people, which give her the energy, keep her continue to have the strength and continue to work on. So I don't think it is a disadvantage to have this diverse presence. We just need to know how to get them to work together. And I think for senior staff will enjoy having the presence of the more less experienced one. Likewise, they will feel more comfortable to consult the more senior one. I feel that if we can look deeper, we can leverage these strengths.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, over there we have 2 questions. If you can stand up and get the mic. And can you introduce yourself? And
from GSK.
Yeah.
So could the MD share, how do you overcome some of the challenges in your journey as an MD?
Okay. So name one of your biggest challenges and then share how you
Sure.
overcome it. Okay, wonderful.
You want who to answer the questions?
If it's not so greedy, can I have all 3?
Okay. One of my challenges when I first took on the site lead role is how can I continue to grow the sites. And I have 2 different sites. They have a different business challenge. One of the API site is antibiotic site, which the cost challenge is very important. And the other side is another innovation side where being creative, innovative is very important. So the challenge is how do you switch your decision making process between these 2 businesses, and it's run by the same business leadership teams. So we often have to deal with that. And as most of you know, that GSK has been here for 45 years and the other 30 over years. So we have this aging asset. How do we keep the operation here continue to stay ahead of the competitions? You need to have a place to renew your asset to ask for the new capital investment. Yeah. So the first task is to say, you know, how can I convince my corporates to inject more money to save more? Obviously, it's not easy. So you have to find a lot of the way. That's first, convince yourself that the technology they're going to build in will benefit the sites. And second, you need to know who will be the key decision maker. And often, this will not achieve in one single goal. There's no such thing that you put out a business proposal today, within only one time you will get your money. It is a long process, so you need to have a lot of the resilience over time, bit by bit, set up the roadmaps to get that. So ensure that you have a good asset, ensure you have a good people with us. This is one of the challenges that I think as a side that I see that's very important for me to tackle on. Yeah.
Great. So knowing your stakeholders, how to manage them, and also having the resilience to persevere.
Yeah.
Arleen.
Yeah, so if I think about the various roles I've had, one particular role that was quite challenging for me was I came into a new organization where I was responsible for all the clinical programs at Amgen. And the team, it was an end-to-end supply chain, so it was everything from planning to making the drug substance, the drug product, the packaged product, and then all the distribution around the world. And the organization actually had a very good history of delivery. So things were going really well. And my task was to come in and completely change the way we thought about the business. And it's easy to think about change when things are not going well. It's not that easy to think about change when things are going well and everyone's saying, why do we have to change, right? Our success rates are good, we're delivering product. And as part of that, I had to change the way we thought about it. And the organization really thought of themselves as clinical operations, and what we delivered was clinical product out the door, which was one of the things we delivered. But what I wanted them to also think about was, you actually have two deliverables. One is clinical product, the other is relevant data. And the reason that was so important is because we were a step along the way in commercialization. And what we were doing in clinical enabled our colleagues in commercial. But we never thought about it that way. We thought about it in terms of the decisions we made were good for us in clinical, but someone else will have to figure out if this process actually works, routinely, if this particular container is the right one for commercial. And so it was changing the way people thought about the business. It also required some upgrades of our facilities, which were some of our older facilities. And then in the midst of that, we had a company-wide transformation initiative, which then required some additional transformation for the larger process development organization. So you can imagine that there's a lot of people trying to figure out, what is my role? Why are things changing? What is it gonna look like, next week? And so it was about motivating people. It was about keeping people focused on the right things at the right times, but being able to be transparent enough to tell them to have a kind of picture of where we were going and how we were gonna get there. But it was also being vulnerable and letting them know there were things that I didn't know, and that we were gonna have to figure out together, and that we might fail in some things. But if we were good about analyzing what needed to happen and thinking through that we had to fail fast and then recover quickly. And failure, people hate failure, right? I don't know who here likes failure, probably nobody will raise their hand, but failure actually can be a very good thing. And I think for me, the challenge also with that was to get people to recognize that it was okay sometimes to fail. And when you're delivering supplies for patients around the world, you don't want to fail, right? You never want to have that failure. And so it was for me also challenging to figure out, how do I get myself out of the mode of always having things perfect and successful? So that was maybe my challenge.
Thank you so much. It's so important for us because we were discussing as well how a leader is embodying that vulnerability. We spoke about keeping it real, talking about the challenges that they have so that other people don't feel like they're subject to unreasonable standards. Prasad,
Yeah, okay. All right, so yeah, let's put it this way. I never had an ambition to be in a particular position. I mean, it's about the experience, right? And quite often in your career, you need to kind of move, like, Arleen just mentioned about the comfort zone. By the way, you don't have to change jobs to get those experience. Please stay and also experience in the same organization. And of course, if you don't get it, then you can move on. That's okay, right? But the point is, first preference is stay where you are and get those experiences, right? But you have to work hard on it. So the journey is very important. Positions don't mean anything at the end of the day. What's life about? Earning more money, driving a better car, living in a bigger home. What's your success criteria? Those are all very, in my view, transitional. When you have enjoyed your car for a month, you see somebody with a bigger car than you, right? Or if you have a nice camera, you see somebody with a better camera. When are you going to achieve that, nirvana of those things? So try to. I know you're early in your career, but I'm trying to tell you to move away from materialism for a while. If you really want to see purpose in your life, right? And I went through that. And so it's important to stay humble. It's important to stay open. I think the simple mantra I learned in my career is, those who solve problems, they are cherished by an organization. Those who get things done are always valued by the organization. Now, it doesn't matter if you say, oh, this is not my department, I'm perfect. So what? It's end to end, right? If the product doesn't reach the patient, doesn't matter. If you're the best function, doesn't matter. It's so make yourself useful in the organization. You can find out who is useful. These are people to whom everybody is asking for consultation. Now, can you tell me about this? How do you do this? These are the people who are very good at maneuvering at the interspace. Chemistry and engineering, biology and tech services, that kind of a roles. They are very good, savvy at knowing enough to talk to all parties there.
Yes.
And so that, to me, that's what I learned. Because I'm a pharmacist, we are jack of all and master of none, that's what they say. We know a little bit of everything to ask a couple of intelligent questions, but we don't know the answers. But that actually helps so that you don't box yourself into one discipline. So work at the interface, enjoy that experience, and don't draw the boundary too early of what you would like to do.
Yeah, and that resonates a lot also with the trends that we're seeing in this leadership landscape, where it's about broad capabilities and coupling those broad capabilities with your deep competence and knowledge as well. And really being able to cut across all these different silos of information, make connections, and have insights that perhaps other people wouldn't have seen if they're tuned into their silo. Do you want to add on something, Arleen?
Yeah, I think just the comment about the where the interactions occur in that interface, right? I think that where the interactions occur in that interface between disciplines, between functions, is probably where there's the most learning and probably also the most challenge that happens, because you're not just dealing with your subject matter expertise or your function, you're having to cross over and deal with different groups, different perhaps priorities, and I think that when you think through those connections, And as you think about your careers and how you want to grow, right, it's not always that you grow up in level, right? There's growth that happens kind of on the horizontal, if you will, where you're broadening your expertise. And I think your comment, Prasad, about you're not chasing the next role is so important. And I think if I look back, I've been in this industry almost 30 years. And in the 30 years, I've interviewed for 3 jobs. And I've had way more than 3 jobs. And each of the roles that I went into was not something that I said, oh, that's my next role that I want. It was being open to the opportunities that were there, spending some time in the interfaces to understand what's important, and maybe thinking about putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. And then saying, okay, this is an opportunity. I may not be the best at it. I may not feel as confident to go into it, but somebody else felt confident in my capabilities to give me that opportunity, and then just being willing to say, okay, I'm gonna take that leap of faith and try that out.
Yeah, I think it's also super important because there's been a lot of talk about how this traditional notion of the career ladder is now moving to the career web or the career matrix. And instead of just thinking I'm going to move up through my career, it's also about those lateral moves. Trying something different, not necessarily a promotion, but those broad lateral moves actually will come together to make your career a lot richer and fuller, and ultimately contribute a lot more to your own growth as well. I also want to kind of take the question that we had behind. Yeah, so Nathaniel?
Yeah, hi, I'm Nathaniel from Amgen. So we've been going through lessons there yesterday about self-awareness. So could the panel share any habits, tips, or practices that you have been using all this time in your career to be self-aware or to be present?
Who would like to take that one? Self-awareness. We talked about 2 different kinds of self-awareness. We talked about internal self-awareness, your ability to know yourself, your strengths, your preferences, behaviors, and also external self-awareness. How aware are you of how others perceive you, how you come across and show up? Oh, okay.
I think one important thing for me is to be mindful about the impact, the work, the action that you do impact on the individuals. To me, I always ask that, do I like to receive that kind of treatment? And if I don't like to be treated that way, then I shouldn't impose on others. So whenever there is some advice or something disagreement that you want to make to individuals, I think we have to be mindful about the environment and our context that you want to give individuals feedback or advice. Because you always very mindful that you can say something quite fast, but people will not forget this very fast, and you will stay with them maybe for many years, and very difficult to begin that. Take a lot of effort. So be mindful about the choice of word that you give to people or comments. And that's my something that I always try to keep in mind. But sometimes I do need people to tell me that be careful.
Great advice. Yes.
For me, I'm a big believer in feedback, and feedback from all over, right? So it's not just hearing feedback from my boss, but I'll ask my peers, I'll ask people who report to me. I always end my one-on-ones with, is there anything that I'm doing that I need to stop doing? I need to start doing, need to do more of, what do you need from me? Because that helps me to understand what is necessary for the people around me. The reason I like feedback from a lot of different people is that when you get to the point where people are honest with you, you get very good feedback. And if you embrace it as an opportunity to improve and learn, then you can really do something with it, versus, you know, you hear something that, oh, you didn't do this as well, you kind of close up and then you don't get that opportunity to be better at it, right? So I truly believe feedback is a gift if you use it the right way. And so I have a few really trusted mentors who know specific things about how I operate and my style, my personality, and they'll give me very candid feedback on, hey, this was good, you might want to think about this. And I find that really useful because I don't know, you know, going into a performance review and having your boss say, hey, everything's great, you don't have to work on anything, I think, wow, that can't be possible, right? That's not very useful, at least for me personally. And so I try to ask people for feedback. The other thing is there are certain things I know about myself through time that I have come to learn. For example, I'm not a very like big demonstrative, like, you know, bang your hand on the table kind of a leader. But that could come across as, hey, maybe, you know, she's not as interested, or she's not as engaged, or, right, she doesn't have enough like passion behind something. And so I have to always remember, depending on the topic and the audience, how to dial up or down my body language, my voice, my facial expressions, because it makes a really big difference. And I remember one of my mentors telling me one time that in certain meetings, and this was years ago, when I first started to attend meetings with people who were more senior than me, the person said, I noticed that even if you're the person who knows the most about a specific topic, you'll wait and let other people talk before you interject. And they said, you shouldn't do that, right? You should, you know, like be more present in the meeting and make your voice heard. And one advice they gave me was just in meetings, do a tick mark. Every time you had an idea or you had a thought that somebody else said, put a mark down. And every time you had an idea that you actually said and other people agreed with you, put a mark down. And it was a really good way for me to analyze, because I'm also a really good analyzer, I love data, to go back after and say, hey, right, I should have more confidence in my voice because a lot of the things I said, other people agreed with, or I came up with things that others did. So, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, Prasad, anything to add?
Yeah, okay, internally, yeah, I guess I get pretty carried away with technical stuff, you know, something exciting, the latest gadget, and now we're seeing a lot of these things come here. I got to watch that I'm not the head of technology anymore, you know, right? I'm in a site leadership role, right? I got to make sure that all functions are well cared for. At times people may think, I'm in finance, procurement, this guy's talking stuff that's not relevant to me. So I got to be mindful of that. But for me, I use some simple tools. I have a checklist, a little pad with 10 things on it. And that 10 things stay all the time. When I cross one, I add one more at the bottom to do. And it's a very simple tool. You can do it on a phone, you can do it in a piece of paper, but every morning I'll check that list, and every evening I'll check that list again. I maintain a learning journal, and the mentor taught me to this. Every time I hear a good stuff, like a session like this here, or maybe, you know, just hearing to Hock Heng and Arleen, you know, or even on the BBC while coming to work, I quickly go and fill up a page with the date and what I learned. And it could be a simple graph. I try not to use words. I'll use a figure, some pictures there. Draw a tree or draw a circle or a square and present the data. You know and if you refresh it once in a while, you realize, wow, I didn't use this tool. You know, I learned about it. Why don't I use it? That's another thing. Externally, yeah, at times if I get carried away, I might overshadow everybody else. thoughts, and some very nice bits of ideas are buried and they never got time. Time's up, meeting's over, let's go. Right? So my mentor taught me some tricks like holding my finger and only, as long as you're speaking, hold your finger and you release it and you stop speaking. Right? So you become aware that, and this is painful, by the way. Try to do that. With your nail, you poke your thumb, and you are allowed to speak as long as you can manage the pain. And the other thing they told me is that you got 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you got to listen twice and speak once.
Okay, you can let go now.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I also want to address one of the most common questions that we get from BMAC is, how do you give feedback, difficult feedback, negative feedback to your boss? If your boss is doing something that is negative, is getting the team down, or making my life hard, how do you actually have that conversation? How do you change your boss's mindset? And have you ever encountered it?
Very difficult. Yeah. Well, I have developed the skill of telling a negative thing in a positive way, right? Over the years, right? And don't use too many negative words. Give it more like you're good, but you can be better, or things like that. With bosses, it's a bit difficult. I usually don't do it on a phone. I will do it on a casual or a drink conversation, right? Or dinner or something. I'll say, you know what, these late night calls, are burning me out, and it's like affecting my family life. I can do it 3 times a week, but not every night, So please, can we stop having it on Friday night? Would you like me to call you on your Friday night? How you feel about it? So you can do it, but try not to be antagonist there. Try to understand. In my view, I found that most bosses respect when you bring it at the personal level. I mean, if they get the feeling that you're escaping from your workload, and that won't be tolerated. But if you explain to them the people factor. Have you ever seen a boss who says, let's leave a lot of dead bodies, doesn't matter, let's get the job done? Nobody says that. So they are pretty mindful when it comes to the colleague morale and engagement and how people feel about it.
Thanks.
So I actually just had a conversation like this recently, and I find that being honest is always the best way to go, and to not make it personal about either me or my boss that I'm speaking with, and make it about the particular issue. And I recently had a situation where my boss made a decision that I thought was my decision. And he and I had a one-on-one, and I said, hey, I'd like to talk about this particular decision that occurred, and I'd like to understand why you felt that it was important that this was your decision rights versus my decision rights. And here's why I thought this would be my decision versus yours. And we talked through it. He was like, hey, that's a good point. I actually made the decision because I thought it was just easier, because he was thousands of miles away, and he thought people were around him and they asked, and he made the call. And he said, well, I really appreciate that you brought this up, because for him it was also a reminder that even though it's easy, sometimes it's not the right thing to do. And having a difficult conversation is never easy. But I think it's always the right thing to do if you do it in a professional way. And the best is when you get a completely different outcome that changes in the future, right? If you have, not just talking to your boss, but talking to your staff, if you have to have the conversation about course correcting, right? What you want is for them to be better, right? And if you focus it in that way versus here's what you did wrong, like here's how we can be better at it, I think that helps.
Wonderful. Quick comment from.
Quick comment. Give feedback to the boss. I think that's. I think 2 things. One One is if you always do a good job, yeah, and you always be on the ball and things, and the feedback is always on the positive side. How can you get better? So the first thing is, if you get yourself into the conversations that you didn't do this well, this, and the reflection is why you have these conversations. Yeah, and also when you want to give feedback to your boss, you also need to have some strategy. You need to think about your boss is what kind of style. Yeah.
What kind of communication style we just went through.
Is what type of the situations and at which time, which situations. If you just have you know that he's gone through a very busy period, and this is not in his mind, preoccupied with things, and you want to burden him with all the things that you want, I think it's not the right time. So timing is important. Know when to approach him for the questions, and know how to approach the subject. I think these are the two things that and also you can also try to give feedback to encourage them to do more positive things. And by saying that you should give more recognitions, by giving more recognition, the people will do more, do something beyond more for you. And shift them into the more positive side. That kind of feedback will always be good things to do.
Wonderful. So we're coming up to the end of the segment, but perhaps if we could have one last sentence of encouragement or wisdom from each MD to the Zodiac tribe over here. Maybe starting with you, Prasad, yes, you're holding on to your pen.
All right, so success for you from this program is how much of this remains in action a year from now. Not the less 1 month or 2 months, because you will have to write, Crystal will make you do reports and homework, but how much of it stays with you? How much of it stays stuck on the wall? So score it and just take my advice and start your learning journal now, and go back to your journal and see whether you have done it or not, and you're continuing to apply it. Yeah.
Thank you, Prasad. Arleen?
So what I would add to that is make it a habit. So don't just walk away from this session and say, hey, those were really great learnings and those exercises we did were really helpful, and then go back to your day job and never practice it. And so I would encourage you to be very purposeful about it, and if you need to, like, put it in your diary, schedule some time in your day to just practice some part of it. You don't have to do everything. You can alternate throughout the week, but just be purposeful about taking the time to practice. And you have colleagues who have gone through this already that you can practice with, and then you have colleagues who have not gone through this that you can help bring them up to speed with what you've learned. And I think the best way for this to become ingrained is for you to just keep doing it over and over, and then hold your bosses accountable to helping you with this, right? Bring it back and ask them to help you to keep this going, because everyone, I think, is going to be better if we do that.
Thank you. Okay.
No, I don't have any further things to add. I think it's learn and practice it, connect with the people that's already gone through the course, make it change agents that create environments that you can influence and make things happen.
Great. So can we put our hands together to really thank our BMAC MDs for their participation? We've all enjoyed your wisdom so much. I personally have learned a lot and very inspired. Also very happy that everything you said is aligned very much with our program as well. We didn't set it up, it just happens to be this way. The last thing we'd like to do is actually to do a group photo with the MDs.